Welcome to the Configure Price Quote podcast. My name is Sloan and I'm the founder of CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. My guest today is Mark Sloan. Mark is Managing Director of Asaph Advisors, a consultancy that's focused on helping consulting and professional service organizations optimize performance and profitability through business planning and execution, operations optimizations, and interim management. Mark has almost 30 years of business experience with companies like Accenture and will talk with me today about how to sell professional services within a technology company, so a company that sells software and hardware. Mark is based in the Washington D.C. area. Welcome, Mark, to the CPQ podcast.
Thank you, Frank. It's nice to be here.
Very excited to have you. Mark, before we talk about Asaph Advisors, tell me a little bit more about yourself and what you did before you started Asaph Advisors, I think last year.
Correct. Yes. And as you mentioned, I've really been in the consulting and professional services world for going on 30 years now. Started with what at the time was Anderson Consulting, now Accenture. I was there for about a dozen years when I got recruited to go lead a team of 8 wireless industry consultants at another company. And it was interesting because I had a young family, wanted to get off the road and thought this would be a nice job for 3 or 4 years. And long story short, I got there. We grew it from the initial 8 to 10 people to 1,600 people operating around the globe. And since that time, I've been in and out of consulting with other technology companies, helping do a lot of the things you just mentioned. One of my clients actually recruited me to lead a startup company that wanted to be a software company, but was a technology company that really required a lot of services. And so I brought that to the table. We built the business up. We ended up doing a joint venture with the University of Notre Dame to take that technology into higher education. And I exited there successfully about 2 years ago. And some of my former clients have had been calling me. And so that really is how I came to start Asaph Advisors, was market demand and working to meet that supply.
Excellent. So now, especially since this one is almost like a startup again, right? So what do you like or dislike most about the startup phase?
It's a great question. To me, the startup phase is fun. Even when I was at Accenture and this company Convergys that recruited me to lead the services group, I've always been sort of on that leading edge of doing the new thing, which I find exciting, right? Because you can really have a big impact. And with a pure startup, the excitement level is even higher, right? Because there's so much on the line and everything you do every day when you go to work really matters. And I love that phase. So, of course, that's really sort of that, balancing on the razor's edge, right? Of the hardest part of it is, are we going to make it, right? And and hey, is there going to be more work tomorrow, the next day, and the next week? And so it's really just again, it's that excitement level that keeps me up, keeps me up in the morning and keeps me up at night.
Got it. And what do you personally consider the most exciting part of being in this space at this time?
I think the big thing is most technology companies, hardware companies, software companies, they're used to selling this defined product, right? And services becomes this just challenge for the organization to figure out how to sell, because the sales force is used to selling these packaged defined products, right? You know what it is. It fits in a shrink wrap box, and somebody at corporate sets a price. And our job as the sales force is just to go out there and sell. A lot of these hardware software companies, though, need services around that. And there's this nebulous nature of what services are. And there's this, at times I call it a battle between sales and the services folks over, okay, what's it going to cost to implement that? And the answer comes back invariably, it depends. It depends on this. It depends on what they want. It depends on what the scope is. And there's just this back and forth because neither side is speaking the same language. And so I like going in there and really helping translate and really create a common language for them to ease the whole sales process around services.
Got it. And since we're on the CPQ podcast, Mark, one quick question. How are you related in your day-to-day work with CPQ?
I think we complement each other very well. And so some of what I do is really on that front end of consulting into these technology organizations that can then leverage CPQ technology to really, again, speed that whole sales process up.
Got it. Excellent. So one question then, what do you do when you don't work?
Over the last, I'd say 6 or 7 years, I've really gotten into bicycling. In part as a way to stay in shape, and in part I've gotten in with a group of friends. We've done big bike rides from Pittsburgh to Washington D.C., Buffalo, New York to Albany, New York, and this year we did Cleveland to Cincinnati. So enjoy getting out there and riding the bike.
Wow. Very cool. Then let me ask you a couple of questions about Asaph Advisors, right? Or tell me, maybe let's start like this. Tell me in a couple of sentences what Asaph Advisors does.
Yeah, the short answer is we help consulting and professional service organizations optimize performance and profitability. Right now, there are a host of things that the organization has to do to really optimize. And I'll pause for a second. I always focus on optimize as opposed to maximize, right? Because at times there are ways you may be able to drive a few more dollars of revenue or a few more points of margin. But it's really about how do you fit in with the larger technology organization. So there's strategy consulting work around making sure the services organization is aligned with the software, the hardware parts of the organization. There's operational performance on the revenue side of things around defining offerings and really creating repeatability to make that revenue easier. And then on the expense side of things, it's really how do you operationalize that with effective resource management, delivery consistency, and the host of things that the organization needs to do to deliver. And then thirdly is the technology and making sure that they've got the right technology in place from that front end on CPQ all the way to the back end on time tracking and expense tracking.
And so you're covering all kinds of service. So I have an idea: professional service, educational service, managed service, and so on.
Correct. It's really running the gamut.
Got it. And you only focus on technology companies, so companies that have hardware and software, or you have?
It's sorry, Frank. It's a combination of hardware, software companies that have a professional services organization, and then I've also done work with pure consulting firms. And then from a size perspective, typically it's the regional technology organizations that may have 300 to 1,000 resources, but I've worked with global companies that had a 30, 40,000 resource footprint around the globe, and I've worked with small software companies that had a 10 to 15 person services team. And so it's really just about taking the framework we have for effectively running a professional services organization, and then identifying, okay, within that framework, what are the components that are most related to this company, and how do we then help them optimize performance?
And just to answer the last question on this topic, right, the geography, I guess your focus is probably mostly on North America.
Yeah, mostly North America, although I have done work globally as well.
Excellent. Now, tell me in your words, what's the biggest challenge regarding selling professional services within a software hardware company?
And I hit on this briefly, I think, in the introduction. Hardware and software are defined, right? They fit in a box. You know the features, the functionality. Somebody in finance can put together a pricing sheet so that the price per user license is X, right? And so it's really just then all about getting out there, communicating the value proposition, and getting somebody to sign up for X dollars per license. Services are much more nebulous, right? A customer will say, well, what's it going to cost to implement the software? And invariably, the professional services response is, it depends, right? And when sales is involved, they don't want to hear that, right? And so there's a lot of friction that I find that exists between sales, who really just wants to get a number in front of the customer so that they can keep the conversation going and move that customer along the path to closing a deal. And then you've got this services resource who's concerned about committing to a number that they don't have total confidence in because they don't know the full scope yet, right? Or they haven't had time to fully analyze it. And so it's really bridging that gap and coming up with ways that both sales and services can be satisfied.
And how do you overcome the challenge then? Give us some examples.
Yeah, one of the ways is to create predefined package service offerings, right? So instead of waiting for the customer to say, here's what I want, services can say, here's what we will do. Here's the scope, here are the deliverables, here's what you're going to get, here's the price for that, right? It doesn't mean that that's exactly what you're going to end up delivering and signing for, but what you're doing is you're arming the salesperson with something they can go have a conversation with the customer about. You're giving them, a ballpark price, right? So they can determine if it fits within their budget. And then once the services person gets engaged, there may be changes in scope. Maybe they want to add something, remove something, but you're really just sort of greasing the wheels along that process.
I think I got it, but let me give you an example. So if I'm a customer, let's say of HP, and I'm buying hardware, software, and I also want to have services. So now in this case, for whoever is selling this to me, they would have basically three options: a small package, a small service package, a medium service package, and a large service package. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, it's there are invariably common aspects of an implementation, right? We've got to come in and we've got to define our requirements. So we're going to interview 10 of your users, right? We're going to document that. We're going to review that documentation with you. We're going to put a functional and technical architecture together. We're going to do some custom development. And so if you decompose a project that way, you start to look at, okay, historically, what have we done, right? Okay, for small implementations, it's looked like this. For medium implementations, it looks like this. And for large, it looks like this, right? With scope expanding and contracting along the way. And you price those out so that when a salesperson's out there, they can start to, talk to the customer about, well, it seems like you fit in this bucket. Is that accurate, right? And maybe that's the medium bucket based on number of users, the amount of scope you're going to use, what you're going to have, functionally and technically in scope. Yeah, that really looks right. Well, then your price would be this, right? Or if the customer says, no, that's not right, we're actually larger than you think. Okay, well, then you're going to move over to, this bucket. And here's what that price would look like at that point. So it's just getting the services person comfortable that, okay, I can put some knowledge and documentation in the salesperson's hand. They can go have that conversation with the customer and then bring me in down the line versus, everything having to be, okay, hey, services has to get involved. We're really busy right now. Conversations get delayed. Customers get frustrated. It's really that type of friction we're working to alleviate.
Excellent, got it. So I think also when we met in preparation for the interview, right? So you talked a little bit about sales culture and what kind of sales culture a company needs to have. Tell us more how you think a company should get started transforming the sales culture.
Sure. No, it's a great question. And I'm going to hedge a little bit and say it depends on your situation, right? When I was launching the professional services organization at this company that was transitioning from outsourcing to licensed software, I initially struggled to get sales focused on selling our services, right? And we were working to sell both pure consultative offerings as sort of a foot in the door type opportunity to get some revenue, build a relationship, and then the implementation professional services. And so we had to innovate and come up with different approaches. For the pure consulting offerings, right, we were trying to get our sales team out there to get this toe in the door engagement, start building a relationship with the customer, bring some of our knowledge to bear, generate some revenue. But our sales force wasn't used to selling these nebulous consulting deals, right? They just wanted to go sell 10,000, license seats and move on. And so I came up with this approach that we called the RARE methodology, right? And this was a way to make any person comfortable selling a consulting offering, right? We're going to come in and we'll review your whatever process it was. We'll assess your process against industry best practices. We'll recommend changes so that you can improve this process. And then ultimately we'll define an execution plan that prioritizes the improvement opportunities, right? So it was enabling the salespeople to have the initial conversation, right? If they can just remember RARE, review, assess, recommend, execute, they can have those first discussions, they can be comfortable, and then if they had a qualified lead, they could bring a practice lead in, right? So that we didn't have to have 20, 50, 100 different practice leads running out there trying to sell these services. It's a little bit different for professional services around software and hardware, right? Our challenge there was the sales force was so excited about moving from outsourcing to software sales because of shorter sales cycles, lower price points, that they were generating this huge pipeline, right? And again, this was one of these where they just kept coming at us. We need an estimate. How much is this going to cost? I need to go talk to the customer. We as a new organization, we didn't want to stick our neck too far out there. And give them a number that said $10,000 when the deal was going to be $100,000, right? And either upset a customer later, or we'd have to eat those excess costs. So we ultimately developed a level system to estimates, right? And we had level 1 through 4. I've seen other organizations do more, do less, but I called level 1 the cocktail conversation number, right? This was, they're going golfing with a prospect, or they're going to see them out at a conference or a dinner. It just needed to be a rough order of magnitude, right? And we said, look, there's no financial commitment, right? We're not committing to doing this. This is just have the conversation. And then it migrated to level 2, 3, and 4, where as you got more information, you got a tighter range around that estimate, right? Level 2 might be plus or minus 75%. Level 3, which for us was time and material deals, was plus or minus 25%. Level 4 was if we had to do a fixed price deal, we could get it to plus or minus 10%. We needed to get more information from the customer to get more confident and be more definitive. But by putting this leveling process in place, sales could have the conversations, they could get the client on the hook and progress them. And everybody could then sleep better at night knowing that no one was overcommitting the organization.
Novo CPQ Consulting helps you with all CPQ related questions. For example, we help customers to find the best CPQ solution for their business, and we help customers analyze their current business process to determine if and where CPQ can help. Here it's important to point out that we are 100% independent and always look out for our customers first. This means for us also that we don't get paid by any CPQ vendor for providing them new customers or for any other services. We are focused on our customers and always provide the best available information to them. We also help system integrators to improve their services, and we offer the only CPQ industry subscription that provides monthly CPQ news and trends. We have many other services, so check it out today at novocpq.com. Send me an email to frank.sohn@novocpq.com to learn how we can help you with your CPQ questions, and keep us in mind when you look for 100% impartial CPQ advice. That sounds very interesting, but how much work is it actually for an organization to put in place what you just described?
It's actually less work than what we were doing, and what I would say we were doing was running around like chickens with our heads cut off, because we were responding to every inquiry from a salesperson and a customer, and we were responding where we were almost doing the level 3 work, right, to put a time and materials estimate together, when this may simply be a cocktail conversation that they were going to have. So there is some upfront work you've got to do to look at your historical data, to sort of build a matrix of, hey, if this is in scope and this is the size, here's what the pricing is going to look like. But once you've got that, it really smooths things out, because you only have to do the level 3 or level 4 pricing quote when a deal has really been qualified and matured, and run down the pipeline. So in the end, it's less work than running around like a chicken with your head cut off.
So then let me ask one question, especially in regards to CPQ tools, right? So this level 1 sounds like that's something you don't necessarily need in a CPQ tool, right? So that sounds more like a training exercise to sales reps or sales dev people for me, right? But how are these other levels implemented in tools? Have you seen that? Have you an example where that was successful?
Yeah, no, this was before the things were really called CPQ tools, but we did this within software, and I've seen it within CPQ tools where you start to build that historical information into the tool so that as you're configuring a deal, right, you're saying what's in scope. You're saying, you're providing some input and feedback on what that might look like. And the system can then start to generate those estimates. And it's then up to the organization to determine, okay, at what point do we have to have the human really look at what the output of the tool is, and maybe tweak things and adjust it. But I think the technology really helps, even with level 1, but with level 2 and even level 3 deals, because you can start to look historically at what's been done, and what's that pricing look like, and let's put that in front of the customer to again just keep pushing that deal down the pipeline.
And from your point of view, what should every customer that works with professional, educational, and managed services consider before they select or buy a solution for professional services?
I think the key with anything, with any purchase, right? And this is sort of my philosophy. It's really the people fit, right? You're going to be interacting with people through this decision-making process. You've got to build a relationship, a rapport with them, because invariably, things may not go according to plan 6, 12, 24 months from now, once you've made the decision, you've implemented. And you want to make sure that, the folks on that other side of the table, you've got the right relationship with them, and that you can count on them. And sometimes that may mean you're not picking the very best technical solution as 85, 90% of what you're looking to do, but that you can count on that person on the other side of the table. Sometimes that may be a solution that hits 100% of what you're looking for. But for me, in making any big purchase decision, I want to make sure that I can work with the people on the other side of the table, and that we're going to have a good, positive, proactive working relationship.
Got it. And how long is a typical project with Asaph advisors? I know that's a little bit of a fuzzy question, but just to get some idea on how long that effort is.
Yeah, it's the upfront projects we do are typically sort of diagnostic assessments and recommendations, and those are generally 3 to 6 week projects. A lot of time the timeline's just dependent on how quickly the client can mobilize their people, and can we get access to the folks we need to speak with quickly? Does it need to stretch out a little bit? But that initial project is really taking our framework, pushing it down, doing an assessment of their capabilities relative to the things we think need to be put in place. We'll do some validation of that, because invariably as we talk to people, we may misinterpret or not ask all the right questions. We'll validate it, we'll get that refined, and then we'll go away and we'll put a plan together to close the gaps, right? So part of the deliverable, I say at a high level, it's a red, yellow, green analysis, right? Green's where you're great, yellow's where you got a little tweaking, and red's where you've got the big work to do. And that roadmap that we'll put together then will be both a quick hit. Here's some things you can do in the short term to move some of these reds to yellow, some of the yellows to greens. And then here are the longer term things that you need to do, in order to drive further from red to yellow and yellow to green. And then that's where post that initial project, we may come back and say, hey, look, and we can really help you with these things. And then we'll get involved on a longer term basis.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about these benefits then in a little bit more detail, right? So what are the top 3 benefits you have seen or your customers have seen so far?
I think one is just sales acceleration, right? Being able to, get out there and have those conversations with customers better, quicker, faster, is helping build that relationship with their end customer, because they have greater confidence that, okay, hey, look, this company is basing their estimates based on some science and some history and prior work, that it makes it easier for them to say, okay, these folks really know what they're doing, right? So that helps push things further. I think the second benefit along those same lines is smoothing the relationship between sales and professional services. I've written on this in the past. I've seen it so many times where the relationship between sales and professional services is always or often very antagonistic, right? Sales thinks professional services is dragging their feet. Professional services thinks sales is just trying to close a deal and doesn't care if professional services makes a profit or not. And the truth is somewhere in between on both sides. But a CPQ solution really helps smooth that out, right? Because there's a baseline, there's technology, there's history baked in there. And again, that coupled with this level 1 through 4 estimating process, or however the organization wants to implement something like that, really, it smooths that relationship so the organization works more positively and proactively as opposed to at odds with each other.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So since I asked for the benefits, I'm obviously also interested in the challenges, the biggest challenges that you see with your customers so far when they run these projects.
No, it's a great question. The hardest part generally is getting started, right? Is just wrapping their head around a new way of doing this. I mean, as I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. I am, amazed at the number of organizations that still are estimating new projects the same way we were back at Anderson Consulting in the early 90s, right? Where we've got a new project, we've got to scope it out. Maybe we're copying and pasting some old, spreadsheets that were used on a similar project before, but we're, again, essentially starting from scratch and putting this together. But just folks are so ingrained in doing it that way that, thinking about doing it a different way is just hard to get their head wrapped around, right? So it's really finding the right sponsor, the right parts of the organization that are saying, hey, look, this new way is going to be better, it's going to be faster, it's going to be more effective, and driving through that. But like any change initiative, right? There are the resistors, and typically what I found is once you get them to that other side of that change curve, they're also the biggest fan, right? They didn't want to make the change, but once they get there and it's working, they come back and start telling you, I wish we had done this sooner.
And now I have a question which I should have probably asked at the beginning of the interview. Anyway, still want to ask it. What's an ideal customer from your point of view?
An ideal customer is one that recognizes that they need to change, but they're not quite sure how to do it, right? There are times where I get involved with prospective clients, and they sort of know they might have a problem, but they don't really know that they need to change or don't want to change. So it's somebody that's acknowledged, look, we're a little bit broken, right? Or we can operate a little bit better. And that ranges from, the 30, 40, 50 person professional services organization inside a smaller software company up to, the larger global software hardware organizations that have a professional services group. It's, again, just really recognizing, okay, we've got an issue. There's a way to do this better. We need some help, figuring out what our process is going to look like and how we enable that with technology.
And now I have one question because I'm curious to see, what do you want listeners to take away from this discussion about selling services as a product from your point of view?
Yeah, I think the main thing is, and it is a little bit tongue in cheek, right? But everyone's really talking about selling software as a service, right? And and moving that way. The biggest challenge I found to selling services is the nebulous nature of it. And when I talk about selling services as a product, it's really about predefining scope, packaging it up, putting a price around it that's going to generate the target margin for you, and enabling the product sales force to go out there and sell your service offering as if it were a product. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what deliverables you're going to receive. Here's how long it should take us to do it, and the price is X, right? So selling services as a product is taking the nebulous nature out of the picture, so that non-services person can help you really accelerate your own sale of services.
Very interesting topic, but unfortunately, we don't have the time to go into more detail today. But last question is, what's a good way for interested listeners to contact you in case they have any follow-up questions for you?
Sure. You can reach me via email at mark@asaphadvisors.com. And my phone number is 703-507-9788.
Excellent. Mark, thank you very much for making time for the CPQ podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novocpq.com. So long, everyone.